Oh, I didn't expect. We are so many people here. Okay, we do have we do have 1 minute later. Okay, not late. We do left. Yeah. Oh, I didn't expect there's so many people, and it will. Not yet. Someone can sing a song. Oh, it's me. Surprise. Okay, I'm the first one. And I also the moderator these sessions. Okay, welcome to the joint Spinach and the TDWG conference in Okinawa. This is sessions symposium 21st, entitled Indigenous Traditional Knowledge and the National History Collections. And I will introduce me later. And to make this meeting possible, we thank our sponsors, especially our diamond sponsors and the Okinawa Congress for the tech supporter. This session will be recorded for later viewing, so please speak slowly and clearly for the benefit for all attendants and the reviewer. Each presenters will have 10 minutes and 3 minutes behind for Q&A, and the transition will be 2 minutes. So we will have 5 presenters, and the no-show will be the first. So, and we should close at the 17:50. Okay. Podium displays countdown times, and the green one will show in 10 minutes, and the yellow light shows for 3 minutes, and the transition in 2 minutes shows red light. If you attend virtually, please ask questions by chat features in room. Attend in person, please use the microphone. And we are continuously use the chat functions after each presentation, and please enjoy these sessions. Okay. And now I'm the first presenters, and Shu-Juo Chen, Assistant Researcher Fellow from Taiwan National Museum of Natural Science. I'm an anthropologist. I think I am some different with most of them, because you do a lot of taxonomy and something more biology. Okay, today I will present the topic called Don't Keep Naming It Funeral Towel, and advocate of using indigenous knowledge to name indigenous exhibits in Taiwan. Next. Okay, I will do it myself. Okay. Okay, this is Taiwan, a little southern than Okinawa. We are 10 times bigger than Okinawa. We are 15 more people than Okinawa. But the mountain in Taiwan are even higher than Japan mainland. So we will see it's highly polymorphism and highly diversity than Japan. We are happy about that. And we will have old peoples that may come to Taiwan for 7,000 years. But now their population are quite small. There are about 600,000 we call the Taiwan indigenous people. only 2.5% of total Taiwan populations, but they are very diverse, just like the diverse Taiwan biology. They can be divided to 16 tribes. And all the other peoples in Taiwan are mostly Han people. They migrated to Taiwan in the recent 500 years. And what happened in the recent 500 years? The Taiwan indigenous were controlled by many different peoples. From the 1624, they were controlled by Dutch, by Spanish, by different Han regime, by Japanese from 1895 to 1945. And majorly, those governments were not made by the indigenous people. And that indigenous people contribute a lot of the wisdom to the words, as a great writer, Jerry Diamond, wrote in the 2000s, that Taiwan has 10 different languages, indigenous, and all the Oceanian in the Pacific Islands speak only one of that branch. And the other 9 are spoken in Taiwan. So the Taiwan is quite old and the root for all the Austronesians. Since that the Taiwan indigenous has that old history, so their cultures, artifacts are very treasures to all the controllers for Taiwan. So the Taiwan first Natural History Museum was established in 1905, called the National Taiwan Museum, and the second is the first university in Taiwan, established in 1928, called the National Taiwan University. My museums are quite young, can be listed very low, called the National Museum of Natural Science in 1981. And many of the indigenous artifacts were collected, even and many were not seen in the modern time. And so we will see there's a reclaiming and transforming issues of museum collections. The National Taiwan Museum make that reclaim, says many of those species of indigenous cultural artifacts were over 5,000 specimens were collected in my museums. They are mostly being collected since the Japanese colonial period. It is important to note that some of these items were obtained by the Japanese government through their administrative authorities. And this is my museum. It's very young, and my collection is not as old as those old museums. Now today, Taiwan has has a joint collection managed systems by Taiwan government. So the older collection can be found in that management systems. In that system, we can find that's now complete. I just want to introduce you that if you want to know something, to check that website is an easy way, but the digitized is not complete. Those specimens, today I would like to discussion about the naming problems. Though, as you know, most of the taxonomy use the scientific naming regulations. So it is no problem to communicate with scholars all the word that which one names something. And I just learned last year, there's a small fish found in the Africa called what they mean? Wakanda. In this conference last year, there's a researcher in the California Academy of Science. He named a small fish in Africa called Wakanda. And in the meantime, all the fish specialists know the name of that fish called Wakanda. but only the fish didn't know that. Okay. So why it's important, because we doing the things about human, and the human communication will sometimes lost of translation. So I would show you that even the two big language system called the English and the Chinese, the vocabulary is very difficult to corresponding. There's only 1/3 of the Chinese can be exactly equivalent to the English words. So how to make this Chinese and English control vocabulary can be domain mapping is a big question. So there's a questions about that, because each people speak each different language. The knowledge behind it is called the lexical semantics. And this is a very interesting the case. There's a movie called Lost in Translation. And in Chinese, we give it another meaning translation, but it's not exactly the same. But in Japanese, they just name it by its sounds. So what is perfect, or what is good words? We don't know, because it depends on different cultures. So if you don't know how to spell the Japanese, just name it Lost in Translation. That's the name of that movie in Japanese. But whether the Japanese know that the meaning, I don't know. So now I'd like to talk the story about the clothing, because in the Chinese or the Chinese characters cultural circles, we refer to as a mourning clothing system. It can only be used in mourning or the furniture situation. It cannot be used in the daily times, and there has a kinship's closeness. But this system, or this ideal system, were not used in Taiwan indigenous peoples. But there's too few indigenous anthropologists in Taiwan. So most of anthropologists in Taiwan are Han people. So they refer this idea to the indigenous clothes. So these clothes were named the mourning craft. And this not started by the Han anthropologist, but Japanese anthropologists used it first. And this is the oldest one can make this kind of textile. Now she's 80 years old. And most of that kind of textile were storage in the museum. And today the young Taiwan people, the indigenous people, only can learn this textile in the museum and start to call it the funeral text. So that all weavers feel very angry about it. So since this kind of clothing was not only used in the funeral, but also the daily use. Why the anthropologists confused about, because it can be only used in the noble or the hierarchy family. So it's very hard to find it. So the Han and the Japanese anthropologists made it confused to refer it as a funeral clothes. But it's very hard to make it defined very clearly, because the words vijik is a polysemy words. It can not only refer to the clothes, but the carving, but the tattooing hand, they are all named vijik, because there's another idea says that it's very fine, it's very subtle patterns can only be used in the noble family. But now this kind of idea were forgot or be replaced by the funeral. So my talk will advocate of using indigenous knowledge to name indigenous exhibits in Taiwan, since we are not just talk to the dog or any animals. We are thinking to talk to a dog, but we are actually talk to myself. But those people are still live or still alive. We need to talk to the real ones to say, what do you think about your own cultures? So the study purpose solution to improve that interoperability for multilingual knowledge, organization systems in the domain of indigenous exhibits, and the indigenous talents with museum skills and museum professions who understand indigenous knowledge are equally important. Two-way education and promoting communicating must be more committed. Okay, this is my last slide. This is a promotion for my next presenters. We all agree that indigenous knowledge is very important, and we know this feature very clearly, but the Austronesian the Australian indigenous make a change, make it more interesting. Okay, so that's my presentation. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, just, we do have how many time? More, oh, sorry. So we don't have any time to discussions. We just invite the next speakers.
Thank you. I'm Alison Vaughan. I'm the manager of the Herbarium Collection at Royal Botanic Gardens, Victoria in Melbourne, Australia. So my talk today is about Indigenous knowledge and natural history collections. And so it seems fitting to start by acknowledging that we're on the lands of the Ryukyuan people here on these beautiful islands, and to acknowledge their long-standing cultural connections and custodianship to this land. So juggling the two screens here. So the Indigenous knowledge and the Hann Expedition project that I'm going to be talking about seeks to recontextualise botanical specimens collected on an expedition in 1872, a European exploring expedition. And those specimens are now distributed between three herbaria: the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew Herbarium, the Queensland Herbarium in Australia that sits on Yagara country in Meanjin, Brisbane, and the National Herbarium of Victoria, where I work, which sits on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country in Naarm, Melbourne. I'm going to briefly talk about the colonial context of 19th century botanical exploration in Australia, give a quick overview of the Hann Expedition project, and share some details of the different stages of the project. So 19th century botanical exploration in Australia, like in many colonised nations, was driven in part by an imperial need to know and name place in order to aid that sort of laying claim to the land, and also by a desire to seek out resources that could be exploited by empire. In Australia, that exploration relied really heavily on the assistance of Aboriginal guides, who helped navigate country, political and language boundaries. They helped find food and water that kept the expedition parties alive, and they shared knowledge of plants and place, which has largely been unrecorded in sort of botanical annals. The people who filled those roles as those Aboriginal guides sometimes did it with a level of agency. They managed to negotiate some power within that colonial context, but they were very often as well forced to do that into that work by violence and threat of injury to them or their families. But although the specimens collected on those expeditions are really artefacts of that colonial power imbalance, they also have this great potential to contribute to healing processes. They can be prompts for truth-telling and triggers for memory and the reinvigoration of knowledge that has been disrupted by colonisation. Now to the expedition in question. So this was called the Northern Expedition, led by William Hann, and it sought to establish the mineral and agricultural potential of Cape York Peninsula in northern Queensland. Alongside Hann, the expedition party included Jerry, the Aboriginal guide who's not pictured, Dr. Thomas Tate, who was the botanist, Norman Taylor, the geologist, and 3 other European men. Just to give you a sense of where we're talking about, it's a region of Cape York Peninsula in far northwest Queensland. So sorry that the picture on the right's a bit blurry, but it should still give you an idea that the expedition traversed many, many linguistic territories in the Cape. So each of those names on the right is not a place name, but a language linguistic group name. The expedition encountered Aboriginal peoples along the way, sometimes violently, sometimes not, and those interactions were recorded in the diaries of the expeditioners. Sorry, I should just say too that one of the big legacies of this expedition is that there were reports of gold on the Palmer River, which is one of the rivers that they renamed. And those reports of gold led to an influx of about 20,000 people over a decade, and that's the Queensland's biggest gold rush. And so obviously that had devastating effects, a lot of violent disruption for the Aboriginal peoples who lived in that area. So on the expedition, geological specimens were collected by Taylor, and both Taylor and Tate collected botanical specimens. So those specimens at Kew and in Melbourne were listed in this paper in 2019. And since then, we've discovered that there are at least 18 in the Queensland Herbarium as well. So those specimens, along with maps and charts and diaries from the expedition, are really central to this project. They provide a prompt for truth-telling and storytelling that explores the expedition, colonial science and silence too, and the ongoing impacts of colonial violence on Indigenous peoples. I think for me, one of the most poignant aspects of this project and why it feels so special that I get to be a part of it is that it's being led by 3 direct descendants of the expedition party. So Nicole Huxley, who's a direct descendant of Jerry, Dr. Cami O'Daly, who's a direct descendant of Thomas Tate, and Peter Taylor, who's a direct descendant of Norman Taylor. And so it makes this project really uniquely and I think really powerfully positioned to examine the personal, scientific and socio-political legacies of the expedition. So it's not just an abstract sort of bit of research for these people, it's their family histories as well. So the project was co-designed with Balcanoe Cape York Aboriginal Corporation, Development Corporation, and the 3 herbaria. We obviously had less say than the Aboriginal corporations. And through engaging with truth-telling and with the Aboriginal knowledge holders on Cape York, we hope to correct some of the historical omissions and tell a more complete and honest story about the way in which these specimens were collected. The project is planning 3 stages of on-country engagement with Aboriginal communities, which I'll talk really briefly about. But for those of you not familiar with the Australian context, I just want to talk about what country is in this context. So this definition I'm about to read comes from the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. It says, country is the term often used by Aboriginal peoples to describe the lands, waterways and seas to which they are connected. The term contains complex ideas about law, place, custom, language, spiritual belief, cultural practice, material sustenance, family and identity. So it's a lot more than just Western notions of state or country boundaries, and it's about much more than just the place you're on. So these on-country engagements have 3 stages. So the first one would actually started in July this year, and there'll be follow-up next month in October. An initial consultation with key Aboriginal traditional owners to determine their interest in and the best approaches to the truth-telling around the expedition and its legacy. And that will include truth-telling around what's known as the Battle Camp Massacre, which didn't occur during the expedition, but it occurred a year later on the Palmer goldfield. So it was very much precipitated by that expedition. That's going to be followed up in October by the on-country truth and storytelling at Normanby Station, so one of the stations that the expedition, in that area of the expedition, with descendants of survivors of that massacre. And they'll use botanical specimens and maps and things as prompts for that. Next year in April and May, we'll have a multi-day field forum, and that will have up to 40 Aboriginal traditional owners and community members, along with representatives from the 3 herbaria. And in that, we'll be really looking at coming up with a methodology for how to do the broader bit of truth-telling. And then following that is the full implementation of on-country engagements, and that's across the whole footprint of the Hann Expedition. So what those engagements will do iteratively is collate and record the truth and storytelling by interested communities. It will include Aboriginal people, but also non-Indigenous people from those communities who are interested in and willing to face the ugly truth of that part of the world's history. So one of the tools we've prepared for these on-country engagements are printouts of the images of the herbarium specimens. We've put them on one side of the sheet and then with a real-life photo of the specimens as well, because sometimes they're not the specimens, as you would know if you work in herbaria, they're not always a great indication of what the living plant looks like anymore. And then with a distribution map from GBIF. So they were, the first lot of those were taken up on country in July, and they apparently I wasn't there, but they were handled so much and really well received. They were just a great source of fascination. So alongside the specimens, we'll be using maps, expedition diaries, all sorts of different bits and pieces that we can to prompt this sharing of two-way knowledge. So in doing that, what we hope to do is come up with a way to acknowledge the histories of the specimens and the country on which they were collected. We hope to enrich the specimens ethnobotanically by recording Indigenous cultural knowledge alongside the Western botanical knowledge in our collection management systems if requested by the traditional owners. It's certainly not something we would just go and do, but some traditional owner groups are keen for us to do that, to sort of elevate different ways of knowing alongside each other. The other aspect of this that we can do is connect specimens to country via enhanced georeferencing. So using Aboriginal knowledge of plants and place and the expedition resources. So like many specimens of this era, the collecting information on the specimens themselves is really vague. But we can use the expedition chart, which has been mapped against, it's not a very accurate chart by itself, but it has been mapped by a GIS expert at the Australian National University against topographical features, and they've pinpointed the campsites from the expedition more accurately. So we can use that, and we can, talk to traditional owners and help them, they will help us pinpoint the localities. That map is actually going to be printed out as a 3 by 5 metre walk-on vinyl map, so to really help that connection take place. We'll also do some on-ground, ground truthing really, to look for physical evidence of the campsites. So all of this work will make the scientific utility of those specimens better. So I should just finish up. I've got about 40 seconds here. just want to point out that this project really is evolving. There's a vague, I wouldn't even call it a project plan so much. It's just a series of intentions. And the most important thing with a project like this is that we focus on the relationships, the collaboration and the co-design, that we don't go into a project like this with really firm ideas of what's going to happen and what the outputs are going to be, because they need to change in response to community output. If not, then you're just perpetuating sort of that colonial power imbalance. But regardless of how it unfolds, we hope that by recontextualising the specimens and the way in which they were collected, we can help heal the past through that truth-telling, and together with the two-way knowledge sharing, come up with a more powerful data set with which to protect the very special and very unique flora of the Cape York Peninsula. Thank you.
Any questions? And we don't have the chat question either. And you can welcome any in-person question. No? Okay, we are.
We've got one just here.
Yes,
I saw the cheat sheets that you had, or the papers, had at least some text on them. Is there still the same linguistic diversity? And if so, how did you determine what language to put that text in?
This herbarium specimens, or the sheets, the sheets that we printed out. At this stage, they've got the taxonomic name, the scientific name. The text down the bottom was just credits for photography and the map. What we are hoping to do with those is that, there'll be things that can be written on and be used to capture knowledge and different names and things like that as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alison. And now we'll welcome Jennifer from Milwaukee Public Museums.
All right, hello everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Zaspel. I'm the academic dean for the Milwaukee Public Museum. And so that means I oversee collections, research, education, exhibits, and more recently, our community, Native and Indigenous engagement initiatives for the museum. And I guess I should give the title of my talk. We're going to talk about origin community engagement as a foundational building block for building a new natural history museum. All right, so I do see some folks here from Chicago, but I'm guessing many of you have probably not visited the Milwaukee Public Museum. So I have here a little map showing where we are in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, just about 90 minutes north of Chicago. So the Milwaukee Public Museum was chartered in 1882. And we actually have about 500,000 visitors annually. We have 3 floors and 150,000 square feet of exhibit space at our museum. And we also have 4 additional floors with research lab space and collections in geology, anthropology, history, paleontology, botany, and zoology. And so we're about between 4 and 5 million specimens and objects in our collections. We also have a dome theater and a planetarium, a greenhouse, a green roof, a USDA arthropod rearing lab, and butterfly vivarium. And despite this museum being a community and even global treasure for research and education, our building is failing us. And so I have some exciting news, and that is we are building a new Milwaukee Public Museum. And so I'm not sure, I see a couple of folks here who have maybe seen some of these renderings, but we are scheduled to, we broke ground in May, and we're scheduled to be open in the spring of 2027. And so, let's see, this new building will be about 6 to 8 blocks away from our current location. And these are just some additional renderings showing what the building will look like at night with the planetarium here. And then this is sort of the interior lobby, and this is a terrace space that'll sit outside of the new butterfly vivarium here. And if you were to take a cross-section view through the middle of the building, this is what you would see on each of the floors with a Wisconsin natural and cultural history gallery called Wisconsin Journey, the rainforest exhibit area and vivarium across from it. Here we will have a global cultural and natural exhibit gallery called Living in a Dynamic World, followed by our deep time sort of dinosaur paleontology and evolution exhibit Time Travel. The planetarium will sit underneath of that. And then all the back of house collection spaces and temporary exhibit gallery will be on the other side here. These two areas are connector spaces. And so these are sort of programmatic areas that sit at the interface, or will sit at the interface of our back of house collections areas and the permanent exhibit galleries, allowing folks to have a view into the collection storage spaces and also discuss topics that might be relevant to the permanent galleries across the way. And then down here will be our Milwaukee Revealed, so the Milwaukee Culture Natural History exhibit gallery there. So the goals there are many goals for this project, but the goals that are sort of relevant within this context is that, it's our hope that objects that we have and cultures from the US and around the world are showcased in these spaces, but that will be more culturally sensitive and responsible in the sharing of this knowledge. And we also set out to contact representatives from each culture community that may be connected to the objects or specimens we plan to display in the new space. And so it was our hope to involve the global community to really make a better museum this time around. And so a lot of this work came from conversations that the Milwaukee Public Museum leadership team had, with various focus groups and members of our Native tribal members across the state who shared, that this space is going to be more than a museum to us. This is our home, and our history should be told by us. And so this is a quote by Mark Denning from the Oneida Nation, and this is a very important statement for us as we embark on this incredible project. So from here, our community engagement efforts set apart onto two different tracks, with one being community engagement across the state of Wisconsin with Wisconsin tribal nations. And that effort has been led by our manager of tribal relations, James Flores. And so he's been working with tribes across the state, looking at various objects, translations and specimens and stories, mainly within the Milwaukee Revealed and the Wisconsin Journey galleries. And it's been Dr. Erica Tucker, a colleague of mine and our community engagement project manager for the museum, and myself working with global communities on the objects and specimens that will be showcased in the Living in a Dynamic World exhibit. And so just diving a little bit deeper into the space, this is the floor plan and layout for Living in a Dynamic World. And the big idea for this exhibit gallery is that in all corners of the globe, life thrives in an astonishing variety, adapting to and interacting with our ever-changing world. And so the main messages are that our planet and life upon it are diverse and dynamic. We are alike. Earth presents its residents with similar universal opportunities and challenges, but we're also different in how we respond to these opportunities and challenges within our environments make us unique. And so these are some of the things we'd hope to capture as we thought about storyline development for this gallery. And so here's some more fun pictures just showing renderings of the space. And so this is the point of entry to living in a dynamic world. There's going to be a multimedia interactive globe here, and then you'll enter into each of the various natural landscapes that will be featured in the space. And so we are featuring an Arctic area in this exhibit that will highlight stories from Arctic indigenous people and the Sami. We have a mountain natural landscape in this exhibit featuring the Quechua and tribes from the Andes. We're featuring various cultures from the Japanese Ainu, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Pacific Islands in our islands biome or natural area, and then also featuring tribes from the Great Plains, African Plains, the Icoma in the grasslands, and then also ancient Egypt and the Hopi in the desert natural landscape. And so these these cultures are represented here because they represent the strengths of the Milwaukee Public Museum's collections, and so that's kind of the driving force behind why these were selected. And again, this is just for fun. I'll go through these quickly. This is a mountain scene. And then this is our island scene. We have lots of collections from the Caroline Islands, so many objects will be represented from that area will be represented in the space. And then the grasslands will have the Icoma and other African tribal collections represented. And then we also have a phenomenal Nampeo pottery collection, and so we will be featuring items, ceramic items from that collection, many of which are on display in our museum currently. So this sort of reads like a results slide, and really this is what it took for us to get to the experts and the cultures representing our collections that could tell us something about the objects that we were planning to display for the future museum. There's no right recipe to how to do this. This is just how we did it. And initially it was very overwhelming to think about how to approach community engagement at this large global scale. Where to begin. For those of you here who know me, I am an entomologist. And so my experience in working with collections has been heavily focused on the natural sciences. And so we didn't have a list of names or a starting point, but since the stories that we were proposing for the new space, put our organization's collections at the forefront, we were able to use those collections and those data, and even our colleagues that we had done field work with in different areas across the world to really start, knocking on doors, sending emails, calling people on the phone. Do you know someone, that we might be able to talk with about this project? And would they be willing to look at an object list? And would they be willing to tell us, are these objects and specimens appropriate for display? And so that is what we did, and we've been doing that for over 2 years now, and I would say with great success. For the Arctic, we've contacted over 25 people representing 13 different cultural organizations, more than a dozen organizations and people, representing our collections from the South American mountains. And you can kind of see a similar set of organizations and people across the board here. But over 17 countries were involved. And so we spent, and Erica she's a data person, so she calculated that it's been, well over 509 days, in terms of time spent so far cultivating relationships, via many, many different ways. And we don't think this work we hope it's never done. We're certainly not done, and we plan to continue, especially as we acquire new collections and specimens into the future. There have been challenges, many different time zones, many different languages. We've had to hire translators to come in and help us through some of these conversations. Sometimes we don't have the right internet that's needed. Some of these locations are very remote. People are traveling a long way just to talk to us for a few minutes, but we super duper appreciate it. And then, of course, varying degrees of technological experience and schedule keeping on both ends. And so that has been, there's been some logistical challenges, but folks always get back to us. And so that's been just so wonderful and so encouraging. So we've met a lot of people, wonderful people along the way. People ask me, well, what surprised you? Have you learned something shocking or, that you didn't know about your collections? And not really. What surprised me is that we've never been told no. We've never been turned away in this work. Folks have been really, really excited. In some cases, have even said they're honored to be asked to participate in something like this. It's been a very, very lovely journey, and for me, something very different in terms of, my own career path and where it's taken me. That said, some objects weren't what we thought. Maybe they had a different function or were even representing a different culture. Some might have been more or less unique than we originally realized. But the connections made during this phase of this project, we hope to continue that. It's been really, really phenomenal. And so, of course, I want to thank all of the communities that have helped us. That's a very, very large spreadsheet, and I'm happy to share that information if folks are interested. But I also have to give credit to all of the folks that are helping with this new building project. And I hope that we'll see you all at the new Milwaukee Public Museum in 2027.
Hi. And thanks, Jennifer, for giving us so wonderful talk. And I wish we all can visit your new museum in 2027. So we don't have the discussion chat, and you are okay. Since we have no show, no data, no connections, so we would need to have a 15 minutes break, and the last talk will start. Okay, of course, we are free now, and so if we cannot, we can discussion on time in the place here, and the next talk will start 15 minutes later. You want to discuss with Jennifer? Are you? Yeah, since we have one more question here, we can, if you are interested, you can stay.
Well, Jennifer, I had a few questions for you.
I'm sorry, I was answering right.
No worries. So I noticed on your island section that it is entirely Pacific Islands and mostly concentrated in the Northwest Pacific. Is that just the strengths of your collection, and was that something you took into consideration about maybe trying to have not all Pacific Islands, perhaps?
No, so there's actually,
So that's just a rendering of one portion of that gallery. So we're also featuring Japan and the Ainu in that space, or adjacent to it, I should say. So the renderings that you saw there it's just a small snapshot. That being said, the collections that we have from those islands many of them are from the Caroline Islands, and so there'll be a heavy emphasis on that.
It was just interesting because I was wondering if there would potentially be any Atlantic or Indian Ocean islands represented.
No, we don't have collections from those areas, and that's really, the collections were the drivers for the storylines. So, yeah.
Another question for you. If you truly would like to have everyone come to the Milwaukee Public Museum, you should consider hosting a spinach meeting in the near future.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
Well, I think we'd love to host, certainly when the new building is open, so keep us in mind.
When in 2027 is the estimated
Spring, mid-spring, yeah.
summer 2027 meeting?
Let's see what happens in 2027 and get back to me.
I have another question for you. So in finding the various people to speak with, how did you decide on who they were and what their authority was about those collections? And what level of authority they held?
Yeah, so that's complicated because it's a little bit different for each collection and each area of that gallery. But I will say that we did try to set some criteria because you need to start the conversation and you need to set some goals. So Erica and I, we said we'd love to have, an individual representing an area or a region represented, or a small group. We'd like to have a cultural organization represented, and then maybe an academic, group or individual. Help us kind of navigate, at least initially getting to a point where we could give a presentation about the project and then have someone take a look at the objects. And so in some cases, that came pretty easily. The collections that we have, representing the Ainu is a great example because they have a museum with curators that, are experts in language and art and, and artifacts and even their own community, Indigenous community engagement. And so, with that, we were able to kind of, I guess, meet the criteria that we set. And several of the curators, were living descendants from the Ainu. So, we were trying to cover as many bases as we possibly could. In some cases, we were not able to, to make all of those connections, but if we got 2 out of the 3, we were, happy that we got there. And, some groups, like with the Nampeo pottery collection, we were able to speak with the direct descendants, a descendant who knew about her process. And so it's just sort of a little bit different depending on, the collection, how many different types of people and communities and organizations we connected with. So, but you could see in the end, the numbers ended up being kind of the same, but yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And it seems that we do have 9 minutes. 9 minutes later, we will the next talk. And you can also just take a rest. Take a break.
Pretty much smack dab in the middle.
Okay, thank you everyone. Then this is the last talk of these days. And we welcome the Tsuo-Ting of Taiwan. He will give me a talk.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to have the presentation about our archaeological biofacts collection in our museum. My name is Tsuo-Ting Li, and I'm from National Museum of Natural Science in Taiwan, and I'm an archaeologist, but also a collection manager. So this kind of specimens is one kind of I think something difficult to deal with for me. So I would like to get some experience and some help from this talk. Okay. First, Dr. Chen already have some introduced about the history of Taiwan. So here I want to talk about since Taiwan we have a long history, and also we have a lot of the local chronicle and the travel note from the 16th century to 19th century. Just like this picture, you can see the central this scene is a local chronicle that called 诸罗县志. That is a record, and that is a record about the Taiwan indigenous, who they are hunting deers with dogs. And also we can see some picture and the draw from the Dutch period or the Japanese period. They also have the same things. So from this, according to this, when archaeologists excavate the dog skeleton from the archaeological site at 4,800 years ago, that really inspired us to consider about the question about how long have the people have the domesticate the dogs, and also have some research about the morphology change of the ancient dogs in Taiwan. So, among archaeological specimens, this kind of remains is one kind of the biofacts, also called ecofacts. That is a very unique specimen among archaeological collections. Because since they are natural objects unearthed from the archaeological sites, including some animal and plant remains, and they will easily to decay by times. So they are unlike the artifacts which are human-made. They wither the remnant of organic material and often offered limited direct evidence for interpreting past human activity. So, what is biofacts from? Sometimes this natural object may be remnants from plants and animals that enter the settlement due to ancient human collections and utilized activities, including as food or tool material, or items related to beliefs and rituals. On the other hand, it could be the remnants of biomass that naturally gathered nearby a settlement development. Just like this picture, that is, we saw sometimes when ancient people, they manage the paddy rice field, and there will gather some plant and animal which like this kind of environment. So biofacts can, since they enter the archaeological site in the form of food, they were subjected to heat and consumption, with much of the material being eaten by prehistoric people. This fact in significant impact the preservation rate of biofacts within the site. Archaeological sites that are conducive to preserving biofacts typically have low humidity and temperature. Additionally, the stability of the burial process and the low oxygen condition also enhance preservation chance. As a result, biofacts are often better preservation. I may be wrong direction. Okay, here. As a result, can I take this mic? This is so. Thank you. Okay. As a result, biofacts are often better preserved and more abundant in the features such as refuse piece, hearths, dwelling, or the ancient paddy field, just like I showed before. And then, what kind of the biofacts we have? We have the just like this. We have the carbonized seeds and the maybe some tree bridge and the shell and the animal, the bones. But they are all the natural objects, and we need some the biologist or someone expert to help us to identify it, and they need some spatial method to preserve or storage for them. Okay, how we obtained this object? The first, usually we will make hand excavation. That means we use handheld tools to dig from the archaeology sites. But sometimes we will use screening and the flotation, just like the dry shelving that is suitable for something more hard, just like shell or some more big animal jaws. But the flotation and the wet shelving is suitable for the carbonized object, just like seeds or plant remains. Besides this the macro remains. We also have the micro remain. The micro remains including the phytoliths, the starch, and the pollen. So sometimes we will collect. We also have to collect about the soil and the plug and something that is included or residues. So something including about this kind of micro remains. So how about what is about our storage and management here? In Taiwan, we have more than 1,200 archaeological sites, but of which we only have less than 100 have unearthed biofacts. As I told before, the environment, the burial environment is very important. So in our museum, we have collected biofacts from 10 archaeological sites in Taiwan and totally got more than 50,000 items. You can see that sometimes they will very central only in one site, because in only that site we have using the flotation, and other site didn't do this kind of research. But in these items, this including only 20% of biofacts have been identified and analyzed or published. That's because that's the problem I will introduce later. And this including the carbonized rice grain. That's from the 4,008 years ago. And as well as we also have the some authors from 8 years ago. These various biofacts are crucial for studying prehistory human life and the natural environment in Taiwan, and are also linked to the traditional cultural history of Taiwan's indigenous. So, what's the key point and consideration for accession? There are two major key points in the accession. The first one is identification. Just talk above, the unearthed biofacts, including so large animal, different species animals. So the current lack of thorough analysis and research on biofact is one key issue, complicated the next step in specimen process, which is accession. There are two main challenges just above. So when we do that, for archaeologists, we can only do categorizing used by the anatomical parts or classifying by the morphological features. But after we do that, we will extend help from the biologist. But we found that always biologists find the interesting things from the category we sorting for unknown. Everything we sorting for the wild-boar deers, they didn't interesting. They like to looking for the things from unknown. So I think that maybe unknown is a very important part for research. And so we try to keep these biofacts longer, but just like they are so cracking easily. So stable and shock-up solution in storage is very important. And what we do is to reduce the empty space inside the container and use the absorbent cotton and small compartments, just like this. Yes, this is a small container, but I always think maybe other museums have more good idea, can help us to do this kind of the carbonized artifacts to not artifacts, biofacts to storage for longer, and also these small cards we writing on the species of has been identified, but you can see it's not always been have this. Without this little card is more, so we still need some help. 几分了？好 Okay, we will use this and finally for some exhibition, and then we use the AI to restoration some image of the ancient village and environment. And also I try to use the local chronicle, the words, into the AI, and I can introduce generate image that will help us to know how, and maybe this words is talking about some kind of the plan. So that is what I'm trying now, to make a more vivid image for the restoration, the ancient environment. Thank you for everyone. And thank you for my college in my museum.
Okay, thanks the Tsuo-Ting's talk, and yeah, we can have some time to discussion. Is there any questions? No. Okay. So, and the time is end, and
Sorry.
no, it's good. It's good to have finished this day's journey. So, and have your time, and goodbye.